So shall we start again with the, okay, so we're starting again. Actually, for the first time for those tuning in on the video. And today it's possibly the penultimate day of the subject on dealing with anger. And this is from the third chapter only in Bhikkhu Bodhi's book, Social and Communal Harmony. And today it's a very nice sutta that talks a lot about the mindfulness of the body and how mindfulness of the body can be incredibly helpful in dealing with anger or dealing with what happens when people approach us in an angry manner. So by maintaining that mindfulness, that groundedness, that centeredness within ourselves through the practice of mindfulness of the body, the Venerable Sariputta refutes somebody who is trying to basically destroy his reputation. So this is from the Anguttara number 9, verse 11. So if anybody has the Anguttaras, luckily I'm in my friend's house here in Perth. She has all the suttas. So the Anguttara would be here. So they're these big chunky books, which are rather wonderful. And if you get the Anguttara, then it will be ordered in terms of chapters based on 1s, 2s, or 3s. So the 9s usually means there are 9 different points to understand. And in this particular book, they're all numbered for you to make it a little bit easier. So I understand that the connection might not be the best. Is it still going in and out a bit? Is it still not great, huh? It's okay?
It's good now.
Right.
It's good
Thank
now.
you. Good. Thanks for reassuring me. So I'll carry on anyway, and we'll just pick up whatever we can. And this will be a discussion as usual. So I'll probably pause at certain points to invite questions, but I would be quite keen to get all the way through the sutta today because there's quite a lot in here to unpack. So I shall begin and pause after some time. Great. So here we go. This is called Sariputta's Lion's Roar. And a lion's roar is considered to be a kind of declaration of one's purity in a way, or one's spiritual strength, spiritual qualities. So it's something that happens in the suttas from time to time, especially when people are confronted. The Buddha used to do it too, and he would basically proclaim his qualities, his wisdom, his compassion. And it's, of course, not done from a sense of self, but done as a kind of inspirational teaching for other people to understand that they too can achieve the same things. So it begins. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. Then the Venerable Sariputta approached the Blessed One and said to him, Bhante, I've completed the rain's residence at Savatthi. I want to make a tour of the countryside. You may go, Sariputta, at your own convenience. So this is already very evocative for monastics even today, because it's traditional to stay in one place for the rainy season. And the rainy season in Asia and also in Australia is from the full moon of July to October. And traditionally people will stay in one place at that time and usually give more time to practice, to developing their own meditation inwardly. One of the reasons for this is that in the monsoon period, lots of little animals like worms and insects and maybe frogs and other creatures will come out due to the rain and the greenery around. Here we have the kangaroos. I don't think we're a particular threat to them, but then nevertheless, it's quite nice to stay quiet. And sometimes you can watch the baby kangaroos taking their first jumps, their first hops. So even today, most monastics will observe the rains retreat. And some decide, say in the West, in cooler climates, to have their main retreat period in the winter, but still they observe the rainy season by staying in one place. So it's a kind of determination that we make, an adhitthana that we make to actually stay there no matter what difficulties might arise for us, unless there's an emergency, and we have for that a 7-day allowance that allows us to take some time away, a maximum of 7 nights. And actually, I think we have to be back on the 7th. So very rarely will anybody go out and teach during this time. So the Venerable Sariputta is now asking if he can move around and take a tour of the countryside, probably on foot. So the Buddha lets him go. Then the Venerable Sariputta rose from his seat, paid homage to the Blessed One, circumambulated him, keeping the right side towards him, and departed. Then, not long after the Venerable Sariputta had left, a certain monk said to the Blessed One, "Bhante, the Venerable Sariputta struck me and then set out on tour without apologizing." Then the Blessed One addressed that certain monk, "Go, monk, and call Sariputta." "Yes, Bhante," that monk replied. Then he approached the Venerable Sariputta and said, "The teacher is calling you, friend Sariputta." "Yes, friend," the Venerable Sariputta replied. So just to quickly interject here, it's interesting that if an accusation is made, the Buddha wants to actually speak to the person towards whom that accusation is made and ask them himself very directly whether or not that is true. So this is something we can immediately take inspiration from as well. And I think it's a certain safeguard against making assumptions, or against engaging in gossip and believing what is said about another person. So the Buddha will always go and address them directly and clarify the situation. So Sariputta is coming as he's been requested to. And the Venerable Sariputta, for anybody who doesn't know, is the Buddha's chief male disciple. The Buddha referred to him as his right-hand monk, and he was supposed to be second only to the Buddha in terms of wisdom. So he was actually fully enlightened at this time. And the other monk who is now going to come into the picture, the Venerable Mahamoggallana, was the Buddha's other chief disciple, male disciple, and he was a specialist in all the psychic powers. And the two were very old friends, even from childhood. So it was a very beautiful relationship, a comic relationship, you could say there. So now on that occasion, the Venerable Mahamoggallana and the Venerable Ananda, and that's the Buddha's attendant and cousin, took a key and wandered from dwelling to dwelling, calling out, "Come forth, venerables, come forth, venerables. Now Sariputta will roar his lion's roar in the presence of the Blessed One." So not only did they go to bring Venerable Sariputta in front of the Buddha, but they decided to go and bring out all the other monks and probably nuns who were staying there and get them all to come out and witness what was about to happen. So you can see the trust that they had in the Venerable Sariputta here, knowing that he would roar his lion's roar and make a declaration in front of the Blessed One, certainly a declaration of truth. So then the Venerable Sariputta approached the Blessed One and paid homage to him and sat down to one side. The Blessed One said to him, "Sariputta, one of your fellow monks has complained that you struck him and then set out on tour without apologizing." So this is the Venerable Sariputta's response. "Bhante, one who has not established mindfulness of the body might strike a fellow monk and then set out on tour without apologizing. Just as they throw pure and impure things on the earth, feces, urine, spittle, pus, and blood, yet the earth is not repelled, humiliated, or disgusted because of this. So too, Bhante, I dwell with a mind like the earth, vast, exalted, and measureless, without enmity and ill will." So this is already very notable because the Venerable Sariputta is not actually directly refuting this. He's not saying, "That's not true, that's wrong. How can he lie like that? How could he say that about me?" He's not even saying, I am not like this, but he's speaking straight from the Dhamma. He's saying, one who has not established mindfulness of the body might strike a fellow monk. So he's speaking words of Dhamma, not words that relate to a person here, but he's basically pointing out a truth. And so one who has not established mindfulness of the body might still be capable of that, might still be capable of anger. That also points towards mindfulness of the body as an amazing tool to overcome that anger if it's fully established. And then he's also saying that he dwells with a mind like the earth, vast, exalted, and measureless, without enmity and ill will. So this is quite interesting because that phrase is often used in relation to the practice of the Brahma Viharas and the deep practice of those states. So the practice of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. It's the same phrase. Abundant, exalted, immeasurable is sometimes the translation there. So this also points to the Venerable Sariputta's development of those states. And perhaps it's linking it there to the mindfulness of the body, right? Could it be that by establishing mindfulness of the body to its fulfillment that we also establish the Brahma Viharas as well? Just a question. So I'll continue with these passages and pause at a certain point. So number 2, he says again, Bhante, one who has not established mindfulness of the body, might strike a fellow monk and then set out on tour without apologizing. Just as they wash pure and impure things in water, feces, urine, spittle, pus, and blood, yet the water is not repelled, humiliated, or disgusted because of this. So too, Bhante, I dwell with a mind like water, vast, exalted, and measureless, without enmity and ill will. Bhante, the third one who has not established mindfulness of the body might strike a fellow monk and then set out on tour without apologizing. Just as fire burns pure and impure things, feces, urine, spittle, pus, and blood, yet the fire is not repelled, humiliated, or disgusted because of this. So too, Bhante, I dwell with a mind like fire, vast, exalted, and measureless, without enmity and ill will. And number 4, Bhante, one who has not established mindfulness of the body might strike a fellow monk and then set out on tour without apologizing. Just as air blows on pure and impure things, feces, urine, spittle, pus, and blood, yet the air is not repelled, humiliated, or disgusted because of this. So too, Bhante, I dwell with a mind like air, vast, exalted, and measureless, without enmity and ill will. So I'm going to pause here because this ends the first 4 responses, and you might notice that each one is exactly the same, but just using a different element as an example. So this is a reference to the 4 elements: earth, water, air, and fire. And he's comparing his mind to those elements. Vast, exalted, measureless, without enmity and ill will. So I'd like to pause here and ask for any questions, comments, responses that you might have, or to clarify anything around what's being said so far. So please raise your virtual hand if you wish, and we can have some discussion around it. Perhaps it even refers to the practice of that 4 elements meditation. I don't know if anyone here might have practiced in this way. So if you're shy to speak, basically when you speak, your voice will be recorded, but not your video. So we do ask for your permission with that. But if you're shy to speak or you'd just rather to write a question or comment in the box, you're very, very welcome to do that instead. So we have 2 raised hands. I think you'll need to unmute, Gunter, if you're indicating.
Yes, I have to unmute myself. I think Christina is now unmuted. Thank you.
Okay, am I ready? It's hard to work out what's going on. Thanks, Gunther. Very interesting, Venerable, because I don't know if you know, but after Christmas in January and February, Ajahn Brahmali was doing a 4-week course on the Satipatthana Suttas. And this connects so nicely with that material in terms of, well, of course, I was thinking about the mindfulness of the body and then the 31 aspects of the body that the Satipatthana Suttas focus on meditating, meditating with us, and the 4 elements. So I love the way these suttas interconnect with one another. So it was lovely. And this is kind of a bit more of a distilled element of the Satipatthana Suttas in a way. So yeah, it was very nice to see. Well, that they were the connections that I was making in my mind. Yeah.
Great.
And of course the link with ill will and anger. Lovely. Yeah, that's my comment.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's a great comment. And it's interesting to refer again to the Satipatthana Sutta, because that does talk about the Satipatthana as being a way to overcome the 5 hindrances. The words that are used there are abhijja domanasam, which literally means something like, it's actually a reference to craving and aversion, but it's translated as covetousness and grief for the world, which is very strange. But it basically does mean all kinds of anger and also craving. The 2 are basically sides of the same coin. And so again, mindfulness of the body is one of those satipatthanas, the kaya anupassana. Yeah. It also leads into all the other 4, because as soon as you're aware of the body, you tend to become aware of the feelings in the body, the Vedana, the physical feelings. And Vedana can be both physical and mental. They can also refer to emotional moods or feelings in the mind that are pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So by practicing this mindfulness of the body, it's natural, isn't it, based on the Satipatthana Sutta 2, that we would start to overcome this ill will and this craving, basically the 5 hindrances. So here it's very much referring to overcoming anger, or not responding with anger even when provoked. And I think that's really notable, that the way that it's applying to a specific incident in the Buddha's life, and in the life of the Sangha, to see how those teachings apply and how relevant they really are. And you're quite right, it also talks about these elements in the body, the feces, urine, spittle, pus and blood, which are things we're asked to contemplate as well. In the body. So in a sense, by contemplating that, we also lose our disgust towards it. We just see them as aspects of body, right? Aspects of the 4 elements, in this case, mostly water and earth, and, urine is water, feces is earth. So whatever's arising, the Venerable Sariputta is basically equanimous to that. He's also saying, whether they're pure or impure. So I think that refers to praise as well as blame. Yeah. And then, of course, he's referring to his practice of dwelling with a mind that's vast, exalted and measureless, without enmity and ill will. So when we do overcome that anger and ill will, there's a loving kindness in its place. So yeah, it's very lovely. And thanks for making those connections. Shall we come to James?
James, may I ask you to unmute, please?
So I think, so it's a reference to the 4 elements, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's reference to the 4 element meditation as such, but it's just using the elements as analogies or similes for his mind, that just like the air doesn't react, the earth doesn't react, fire or water don't react. Basically, they maintain their own nature. They maintain their earthness or their airness, whatever's poured onto them, right? In the same way that the Venerable Sariputta's mind remains unaffected, unchanged in its nature, no matter whether you throw praise or blame at that. So he's comparing his mind to the elements here.
I thought also, I don't know much about the four elements and meditation on it. Wasn't it also a means of understanding impermanence as well? So is there an element of that there? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure there's always an element of that. I mean, it depends on our practice and what we're focusing on, but naturally by starting to observe the body, you know, the nature of the body, you'll start to see change, very tangible change taking place there. So certainly all these other truths start to become apparent the more we're able to maintain our mind with the reality as it is. And in this case, the reality of mindfulness of the body. So establishing that mindfulness, and probably he's establishing it continuously throughout the day. So, you know, if any craving or aversion arises, he's going to notice that immediately and be able to nip it in the bud. And in my own experience, I mean, with body contemplation and observing sensations in the body, by being in touch with the impermanent nature, and if I am able to maintain that fairly continuously, it's almost as though craving and aversion don't get much of a chance to arise, you know, as long as that perception is maintained. Because even if something very unpleasant is being experienced, if you're in touch with it as it's actually changing, it just doesn't make any sense to react. You know, it's actually changing the whole time. It's not just that you do an intellectual assessment and say, oh, well, you know, now it's unpleasant, but it won't last. You're actually experiencing it as something dynamic, something like a flow that's just passing through, you know. And in the same way, I think the Sariputta's likening his mind, for example, to air. You know, something comes into the air, like I say, a bad smell, for example, but it just passes through. You know, he's able to observe it, but he has that stability, that vastness of mind to be able to stay equanimous to that. So, I mean, the four elements meditation, somebody else has asked a question about that in the box, and that's another subject, really. I might come back to that later if there's time, because there are many ways to practice the four elements meditation, and I only have been taught maybe one or two. But I think in this particular context, he's not talking about practicing four elements meditation, although that is a part of mindfulness of the body. He's more using those elements as similes for his mind. So I think that's the spirit he intends us to understand that in. Does that make sense? Is there anything else to bring up there?
No, that's all right. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else like to add anything at this point? Okay. Maybe I will say just a word or two about the four elements in brief. Not so much to get into any particular technique, but just to say that it's another way of understanding or breaking down what the body is really composed of. So one of the ways that I've learned to practice the four elements meditation is to experience feelings related to each of the elements. So rather than kind of going through the body, and you could go through the body and just notice, okay, the skull is hard, it's the earth element, you know, maybe organs which are quite dense, earth element, you know. But I think it's much better to actually experience these elements as feelings in the body. So the way that I've been practicing quite recently is to first of all understand the particular qualities of earth. So qualities of hardness, but also lightness. So that's the whole kind of field of weight, if you like. Another quality is roughness, and then the opposite, smoothness. So that's the whole field of texture, you could say. So there's weight, there's roughness, smoothness, and there's softness and hardness. Did I say softness and hardness already? No, softness and hardness. So the whole field of softness and hardness. And you actually can scan the body looking out for those sensations. So rather than just doing a body scan and experiencing whatever sensations manifest for you, when we do the 4 elements meditation, we might take earth element, but we might just take the qualities of, say, hardness and softness. And first of all, scan the body looking for hardness and actually experiencing the sensation of hardness. Yeah. And the whole point of doing this really is to, again, understand that these are not self. Yeah, this is just simply hardness. And it's quite interesting because when the perception does become kind of sensitive to hardness, you can experience hardness throughout the body. At the end of the meditation, when I see things that are hard, it gives me a sense that, oh, my body, you know, the bones or the nails or the teeth are no different in nature from, say, this table or this wooden floor or this wall. And so you start to understand the body as just physical matter, just physical elements. And you're experiencing those elements at the level of contact. Yeah, the passa, the contact between the mind and those elements. So it's a kind of mindfulness of the body, but a little bit more breaking it down into its component parts. So at that stage, I mean, the way I've learned 4 elements meditation, we're not actually specifically looking at the impermanent nature of those elements. Of course, you might notice that, but it's not that your perception is looking out for that. You're more looking out for the qualities of the elements. So it's much more concerned with matter than with Vedana. It's more Kayanupassana than Vedananupassana, if that makes sense. I'm kind of reluctant to speak too much about it because it's a big topic and I don't want to confuse people. But just to give you a sense that it's possible to experience the body in a much more objective way and in a way that depersonalizes that sense of identification with the body. Like you can't really say that earth element is me, that hardness is mine, right? Or that softness is mine. You know, softness is there in your body, but softness is also there, say, in your pillow, yeah, or on in your bed. The softness, it's just one of the qualities of matter. So it's body, it's rupa. Okay, I'll come to Christina quickly because I do want to get through this sutta, and then we'll move on.
I was just thinking about what you were saying, Venerable, and not being, the 4 elements not being so much focused on the impermanence. And then I was thinking, I went down that track of it being a way of loosening up that attachment we have. We celebrate our bodies, don't we? We've got that inclination to celebrate our bodies as special and unique to us, and we crave maybe it's going more in the direction of the craving and seeking after and holding on to. And that example of, if you can see hardness in a table being similar to hardness in the fingernails or whatever, it really breaks that down. It makes the body quite a mundane, everyday kind of thing, not special and deserving of great celebration and our pot, you know. Yeah.
That's a great point, actually. I like the word mundane. It seems kind of mundane. It seems kind of, yeah, it's just matter. And that is one of the phrases that the Buddha actually uses in the Sariputta Sutta. He says that, you know, the Sariputta Sutta develops to the point where you're able to see body as mere body, you know, just as body. It's not necessarily beautiful. It's not necessarily ugly. All that falls away. It's just body. And that also means it's not my body. It's just matter, right? It's just stuff, if you like. You know, it's these elements in various different combinations, formations, and of course that changes. But the idea is to loosen that sense of attachment to the body and that sense of the body being a self or being, you know, either me or mine. So I think the 4 elements meditation is really, really helpful for understanding that, you know, this body doesn't belong to us, it belongs to nature. It's a part of nature. It is nature herself, right? It's no different from that. And it can be quite powerful as a wisdom practice, but also as a samadhi practice, you know, to incline perception in various ways. You know, the experience of hardness is quite different from the experience of softness. And you also see, wow, there are so many different experiences we can almost choose from, if you like, in the body at any one time. So it can also become a way of balancing those elements in the body, but that's a whole other subject, and I wouldn't necessarily advise that. It tends to balance by itself. You know, like, for example, if you have a lot of gas, which I had a lot of before I was got some proper treatment for my gastric condition, it wasn't very helpful for me to focus on air element. I actually felt it kind of increasing the perception of air and therefore almost creating more gas. Similarly, if you have maybe like a lot of heaviness in one limb and you focus on it too much, it could increase that. So it might be helpful to focus on like the quality of lightness, just to remind your mind in a sense that that is still there too. Yeah. So it's quite interesting to practice these things. And I would feel personally that I need to practice it more depth, maybe in an extended retreat. I've probably practiced 4 elements meditation for a week here, a week there at the end of longer retreats, but never for sort of months at a time. So I tend to like to get a really deep sense of the practice before I teach it. So this is just to give you an inclination of how you might wish to add maybe a few more tools to your kit. Yeah, good. So there's always so much to unpack in these suttas, but I shall carry on. So we've talked about the way that Sariputta now described his mind as vast, exalted, measureless, without enmity and without ill will, just like earth, water, fire, and air. So the other aspect of that is that, you know, the earth never complains. Whatever you pour on the earth, it doesn't complain. You know, whatever you put in the air gets blown away. Whatever you put in water gets washed away, and the fire just burns everything up, right? There's also the sense that those elements are so much more powerful than whatever can come as to try to dirty those things. They cannot really be dirtied. So this is definitely the expression of an enlightened mind. So the 5th one, I hope you're all still with me. Ready to read a bit more? Yeah? Yes? Can all hear? Great. Bhante, one who has not established mindfulness of the body, might strike a fellow monk and then set out on tour without apologizing. Just as a duster wipes off pure and impure things, feces, urine, spittle, pus, and blood. Just examples. Yet the duster is not repelled, humiliated, or disgusted because of this. So too, Bhante, I dwell with a mind like a duster, vast, exalted, measureless, without enmity and ill will. That's so lovely, isn't it? You can imagine just woof, 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 and it's gone. You just get this duster. The duster has no particular reaction. It just does its job. So the Venerable Sariputta's mind is now like a duster. Have you seen your mind like a duster ever? Sometimes, right? Sometimes there are things that come up and we just brush them off very easily. Other times they're a little bit more difficult to clean up. So number 6, Bhante, one who has not established mindfulness of the body, might strike a fellow monk and then set out on tour without apologizing. Just as an outcast boy or girl clad in rags and holding a vessel enters a village or town with a humble mind, so too, Bhante, I dwell with a mind like an outcast boy, vast, exalted, and measureless, without enmity and ill will. That's quite interesting. So I think the word humble here is the key. holding a vessel, enters a village or town with a humble mind. So perhaps it's also referring to holding that vessel and keeping one's mind on the task at hand, not being roused into a sense of self that takes offense, but just carrying on with what the work at hand. Any other thoughts about that? I find that quite interesting. We definitely would like some more people to engage. No thoughts? Not yet. Okay. Oh, somebody has a hand up.
John,
Sometimes
may
my
I ask-
videos are turning off. I don't know if your video is on or not, John. Oh, there you are. Super.
John, may I ask you to unmute, please?
Yes, Venerable. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, that outcast boy or girl, is that important? You know,
Yeah,
important point.
I'm thinking that perhaps this is very specific to the society at that time. It could be referring to somebody from a low caste or class, possibly. So it's a little bit confusing, isn't it? Because sometimes, you know, the sort of demeanor that they might have might not necessarily be humility. It could also be a sense of them, you know, oppression or fear. But in this case, it's talking about somebody who's obviously very simple and is entering that village with a humble mind. So perhaps they're a little bit on their guard. It could refer to that. It could refer to being very cautious about, you know, composing themselves properly so they don't attract more animosity, perhaps.
Yeah.
You know, it could be something like this. And maybe the Venerable Sariputta is even comparing himself in a sense to somebody who's a little bit outside of society, because of course, you know, nowadays we might have monastics who live in quite a good degree of comfort, but in the Buddha's day, you really were a rag robe wearer. You know, you went on alms. You would approach a village humbly, respectfully, not knowing whether you might incur abuse. Last week we did talk about the Venerable Punna, was it? Or what was his name? Punna. And he was contemplating going to a place where he knew that people were fierce and rough. And so he also had to approach those villages carefully, you know, and keep a mind that was very guarded, very humble in a sense, not likely to provoke anger in those people who were already fairly fierce. So perhaps the Venerable Sariputta here is actually comparing himself to that, because he is also clad in rags. He is also holding a vessel. He's holding his alms bowl, right? And he's depending on these people for support. So it could be to do with that as well. You know, referring to his own demeanor, his own humility. And also, I guess, the unlikelihood of somebody like that actually taking a blow, giving someone else a blow, right? How likely is that? It's very unlikely as a humble alms mendicant to actually engage in such violence. So just some thoughts that come to mind. Does that make sense?
Definitely. Thank you.
Right.
Hawk, may I ask you to unmute, please?
Yeah, I see two possibilities. One of them being an old man, because we are invisible. Nobody sees us. We walk, we do what we do, we concentrate on what we need to concentrate on, but everybody else in the world just ignores us. And there's something that's very freeing about that, because I don't have to do anything to impress anybody, because nobody sees me anyway. And the other is a person, a minority in a non-minority world, being aware that there is ever danger every minute of every day. And so the focus on the vessel, what you're doing, is a way of not engaging and risking possible injury to yourself for something so innocent as a glance.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's something that it's hard for other people to understand, you know, if they haven't been subject to being, like you say, a minority in a system where you're not, you know, in position of privilege, or, you know, you're not entitled in that society. Most people can walk through the day kind of not fearing too much hostility, at least not based on gender or race, right? Maybe sexual orientation. I mean, there may be dangers, but it won't be based on those things. And those are things that we can't do anything about, right? That's who we are. And so that will have an effect on our entire demeanor and the way that we manage to get through life. So that's a really beautiful and nuance there. Also a little bit of a sad nuance to me. I mean, even when I read this the first time, I thought, oh, you know, it's not necessarily something to uphold, is it, as an example, if that's coming through fear, you know, or a very real sense of the danger. And yet in this case too, I guess the Venerable Sariputta in this particular sutta is obviously subject to some abuse, some wrong accusations. So in that sense, he's keeping his mind very humble and simply focusing on what he needs to do to maintain his dignity. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Is there anything else people would like to share before we move on? Okay. So number 7. Bhante, one who has not established mindfulness of the body, might strike a fellow monk, then set out on tour without apologizing. Just as a bull with his horns caught, mild, well-tamed and well-trained, wanders from street to street and from square to square without hurting anyone with its feet or horns, so too, Bhante, I dwell with a mind like that of a bull with horns caught, vast, exalted and measureless, without enmity and without ill will. So that's really lovely, because he's almost saying that he's incapable of hurting anybody anymore. The horns have been cut off, the horns of anger, the horns of violence. And the result of that, again, is this mind that is vast, exalted and measureless, without enmity and without ill will. In every single simile here, including the last one, which I was, you know, kind of in two minds about, you know, whether that humility is coming from a wholesome place or whether it's an unfortunate and yet necessary response to the inequalities in the world. I think the key here is that it's leading towards that vast, exalted and measureless mind. And that would make the difference there, right? That would really make the difference as to whether the cause is pure or maybe what we do with the situation, how we handle the situation, to see that instead of closing down, you know, and becoming kind of hostile ourselves or afraid and guarded, we actually rejoice in our own harmlessness, yeah, in our own humility or whatever other beautiful qualities we can draw out and develop through the situation we find ourselves in, and create that mind that's vast, exalted and measureless, without enmity and ill will, even towards our oppressors, right? So we have to become mild, well-tamed and well-trained, but certainly not brittle or small. So really we're taming those kilesas, those defilements within ourselves, and also working to ensure that we don't develop the same qualities, the same bad qualities of our oppressors. So I'll continue to number 8. Bhante, one who has not established mindfulness of the body, might strike a fellow monk and then set out on tour without apologizing. Just as a young woman or man would be repelled, humiliated, and disgusted if the carcass of a snake, a dog or a human being was slung around their neck, so too, Bhante, I'm repelled, humiliated, and disgusted by this foul body. So this is a little bit different now. We're going into a slightly different kind of practice, which is called asubha meditation, looking at the foul nature of the body. Yeah? And again, this is to undermine our sense of attachment to it, or like Christina said, that celebrating of the body, of something that's really just a vehicle for our practice and is in itself not really very pleasant or beautiful at all. And it's, I don't know if anybody else recognizes this simile from other places in the texts. Yeah, do you? So in the Vitakka Santana Sutta in Majjhima Nikaya number 20, this is also a simile used for unwholesome thoughts, the removal of unwholesome thoughts. And the Buddha says that one way to remove unwholesome thoughts is to see them as something disgusting slung around our neck, basically exactly the same simile, the carcass of a dead dog, snake, human being. He said in the same way, those unwholesome thoughts are like disgusting things slung around our beautiful mind. And in the same way, we'd be humiliated, repelled, and disgusted by that. So that simile could stand in for the body or for the mind. But here it's talking about someone without having established that mindfulness of the body. So perhaps somebody still clinging to the body as something that's beautiful, something that's very precious, something that's mine, right? That self-identification. How dare they say such a thing about me? You know, we're very, very attached to this idea of who we are. And of course, one of the first ways, the most coarse ways that we identify is with ourselves as this body. And there's another simile that's quite similar now coming up for number 9. So I'll just go through this one and then perhaps we can have some discussion around that. So number 9, Bhante, one who has not established mindfulness of the body, might strike a fellow monk and then set out on tour without apologizing. Just as a person might carry around a cracked and perforated bowl of liquid fat that oozes and drips, so too, Bhante, I carry around this cracked and perforated body that oozes and drips. So I think I'll pause here to see if there's anything else we want to say about what this might bring up for you, or anything at all you want to share or clarify, and then we'll go towards the end of the sutta. So Sybil says that she prefers the metta practice for the body that she's learned from me and from my teachers, certainly. And I think that's an important point too, just to know what we incline towards, you know, and to sometimes respect that, because this kind of asubha practice, you know, seeing the body as something maybe disgusting or unpleasant, is not necessarily for everybody. I do think, as I said earlier, that the whole goal of body contemplation is to see body just as body. You know, in the Sariputta Sutta, it actually says that we should establish mindfulness to the extent that mindfulness, and how does it phrase it? We should establish mindfulness and wisdom to the extent that we know this is just body. Yavadeva Jnanamataya Pati Satimataya, just body. Anisito Chaviharati. So we are able to remain clinging to nothing in the world. So the whole goal of that is that we're able to dwell without clinging to anything in this world, yes? So we don't even cling to the idea that the body is disgusting or beautiful. We just don't cling to body at all. And yet, before we get to that point, it can be helpful to use certain methods to undermine whichever tendencies are strongest for us. For some people, it's the craving, the clinging, the delighting in the body. You know, this is also, the Buddha also says that one of the causes of lust is delighting in our own feminine or masculine features. We actually get besotted by our own bodies, and therefore we desire the bodies of another. Yeah, if we're not so besotted with our own body, then we're less likely to seek delight in other people's bodies. And so for some people, it can be helpful to look at the body as something quite gross, right? I mean, why do people dye their hair, curl their hair, style their hair, put on all this makeup or smart clothes? You know, it's to try to cover up something that's actually not that beautiful at all. You know, we wear aftershave, or I don't know what people do. They pluck their eyebrows. Apparently eyebrows are something gorgeous these days to, ooh, nice eyebrows, wow. So we make our eyebrows a certain shape. And, you know, why do we do that? Because it's just an eyebrow. It's pretty bushy and not particularly good looking at all. You know, we brush our teeth. Many times we use dental floss and mouthwash because the breath is quite gross, right? If we leave it for very long. When you wake up in the morning, do you have pleasant breath? I don't know. I don't. Especially if you have gastric problems, sometimes you get bad breath, or, you know, if you don't use deodorant for a while or have a shower, then there's a smell that comes from your armpits. So sometimes, you know, you can have a bit of fun with it as well. I mean, it's not actually a big deal, is it? You know, is it really that embarrassing to have like a sweat patch under your armpit? It's like, so what? Everybody sweats. So it doesn't have to be like done to the extent of feeling like so grossed out by the body that we, you know, we don't really want to live anymore. No, we take care of the body, we have our shower, we brush our teeth, but it's just to see that there's nothing really that attractive in there. But some people, you know, and I don't know if this refers to Sybil or other people, you know, maybe ourselves at certain times, maybe all of us at certain times, we actually find the body quite gross already and, you know, want to reject it or just want to move straight into the mind when we meditate. For us, it's probably quite helpful to practice metta at those times, you know, to actually make peace with the body and to learn to befriend the body. Be kind and respectful, recognizing all the things the body does for us. Yeah, without this body, how could we be mindful of the body? You know, it'd be impossible to develop mindfulness of the body without a body. So we can see its beauty, we can see how to use it as a vehicle for liberation as well. Yeah. So yeah, metta practice is also very important, and we can direct our metta to the body itself, even to sicknesses in the body, not with the intention that we cure them, but with the intention that we care for them. And I had to do this 2019 after having a melanoma removed on my arm. You want to see my tough forest non-scar? Look at that. Can you see that? It's quite big. You probably can't see it very well. Anyway, it's quite big actually. And yeah, there it is. So everything was going well. They took it out and it hadn't spread and all this. And then, but unfortunately I had the operation just before traveling to Perth, and I had to carry my bags and sit on the aeroplane with it all covered up. And after about a week, it was all icky and infected. And I had to go and have like the dissolving stitches taken out because they weren't dissolving, and it was pus coming on every single stitch. It was really gross. And I just practiced metta, lots and lots of metta to the body. First of all, just general metta, and then when it was quite strong, sort of, you know, just giving the body the opportunity to heal. And I can't say that bang, the infection was gone. Anyway, I'd started taking antibiotics, but it definitely started to subside. Yeah, so metta practice is really great from time to time to keep things in balance. So there's a couple of people who had their hand up who haven't spoken yet. Shirley had her hand up. It's gone down again. Do you want to put it back up, Shirley?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go Shirley, Shell, and then come to you, Christina.
Shirley, may you unmute, please?
I actually put it down because I wanted to make a comment on the outcast child simile, and I just felt it was sort of might sort of disrupt the flow of the discussion. But shall I just go ahead or shall I wait for other people to?
Go for it. It's so important.
I just thought Sariputta was the second Buddha, second disciple to the Buddha, greatest in wisdom. And all these people, you know, you got Mahamoggallana and Ananda sort of hoixing all the monks out of their kutis to come and listen to him. And Sariputta just didn't take that on board. He didn't think, that monk accused me. I'm the sort of second most important monk. And when I thought of that, and it didn't occur to me till later on, I thought, wow, he just didn't take that on board, his position in the Sangha. He just thought, I'm just the same as a outcast child. I'm actually nobody. He didn't identify with his important position at all, which is just quite amazing. And I just found that quite awe-inspiring. So I just was going to keep quiet today, but I just wanted to share that.
Oh no, please never feel you need to keep quiet, because you always have something beautiful to share. Sometimes you might not have something to share, but whenever you do, you're welcome. And yeah, I think that's a lovely way to see it, you know, that he's keeping his mind so humble. I mean, in my experience too, the wiser a person becomes, the more humble they actually are. You know, the Buddha actually says they don't even think they're the same as anyone, so he's probably not even comparing himself with the outcast child, you know, one who is even fully enlightened never thinks they're the same, better or worse. They just don't conceive in terms of a self. And if you look at what the Venerable Sariputta is actually doing, he's not like you say, he's not defending himself, he's not coming from a sense of self. Nor is he putting the other person down in any way. He's actually taking the opportunity to give a teaching on the power of mindfulness of the body. So in a way, he's, rather than taking this in a bad way, he's actually delighting in the power of the practice, the power of the Dhamma. And he's sharing that in such an inspiring way with us all. So yeah, it's great that you took on that sort of sense of, yeah, inspiration from this sutta, because that's really what a lion's roar is all about. Yeah, thank you, Shirley.
Shell, may I ask you to unmute, please?
Thank you. Yeah, I giggled about the eyebrows thing, because actually when I was in teaching, it was the only negative thing I ever heard about myself was, or I say negative, it wasn't really, I was the one with no eyebrows. So I got my bottom set year 10s to teach me how to draw eyebrows on, which gave them great delight, because then they were teaching me something, because I taught them maths, bless them. Anyways, I no longer draw my eyebrows on because I don't wear makeup anymore, and that's another journey through it all as well. But yeah, just with regards to the sutta, it's interesting, these last two verses, I was reading them as very much almost like an admission of guilt. Whereas the other 7 are kind of, for me, just reading into it, responding to you're bringing me out in front of people, and this is how my mind is going to respond, and it's not offended by you coming to me. And these last 2, I was like, oh, hang on a minute. He's now talking about how he's got the weight of these things on him effectively. And yeah, I won't spoil the story. I did just read ahead. But I was like, oh, hang on a minute, this is changing, which was interesting. And it was quite pertinent, the bowl of liquid, the perforated, the cracked and perforated that just kind of oozes. It's that thought of, yeah, carrying that weight around with you that's just going and flowing everywhere and just coming out. And it's, yeah, quite a painful thing when, you know, you realise you've done something wrong. And it does just kind of ooze out of you until you can, or for me, it oozes out of me until I can go and speak about it or accept what I've done and apologise. Or yeah. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, you've interpreted it in a completely different and unique way there. And that's really nice too, in the sense that you could see it a different way. I mean, I think in this case, he's not actually making an admission of guilt, because he's more saying that, you know, part of the outcome of establishing mindfulness of the body is not to see that there's anything worth holding on to in that body, and therefore somebody's anything that unpleasant that happens and that may have an unpleasant effect in the body, doesn't actually affect him. That's the way I read it. But it's just so wonderful that we can take these teachings and apply them to our own experiences in ways that can really help us. And that's the whole point. You know, it's not about the right or the wrong interpretation so much as understanding, you know, how the mind works. And as you say, how it can feel to carry something around that's so ugly in a sense, right? You were talking about the burden of guilt, perhaps, or regret. And also this idea of like not actually being able to admit, to open up and admit that, how it seeps out. Yeah, very nice. Thank you. So we're quite close to the end, but I don't like to leave anything out. So just quickly come to Christina and then try to conclude.
Christina, may I ask you to unmute?
This is just a quick comment, but I was thinking, like, in considering our own bodies in this way, you know, as a leaking vessel and not very attractive, and it also invites us to think about other bodies in the same way. So if we are insulted by another, or another person does something that could potentially upset us, it kind of puts them in the context of, well, they're just another body. Do you know what I mean? I'm kind of trying to take it more into so what I think about my own body, I can extend to other bodies, and it diffuses the personalizing of it, you know, to a degree, not fully, but it's kind of heading in that direction a little bit for me. You know, they're not a glorious body. They're not an elevated being in a sense. They're not much different from me at all. They're earth, fire, water, wind, as I am too. And yeah, anyway, I was just going down that track with it.
Wonderful. I think that's very, very much intended as a part of this, or it's an outcome of this as well. Because of course, you know, just as I am, so is everybody, right? And in the Sariputta Sutta again, you know, the Buddha does talk about understanding these things internally and externally. So literally, you know, seeing your own body as subject to impermanence, you know, not self, and basically a lot of suffering, a whole heap of suffering. Other people's bodies are just of the same nature, and the same with these elements, you know, like I was saying with the table. That can apply, of course, to other beings as well. So yeah, very good. Excellent. And they're just, you know, you can extend it from the body. They're just 5 khandhas, right? Everybody is just 5 khandhas. 5 khandhas means body, feeling, perception, volition, mental reaction, if you want, reactivity, and consciousness. That's all that's going on here. You know, you try and tell me what else you can find that doesn't fall in one of those categories. There's really nothing else there at all. And that's the same for everyone. So, you know, if somebody sees us a certain way, that's just perception arising for that moment in time. That's it. That's all it is. And it's gone. Problem is we cling to these things. So I'm going to continue to read through this so that next week we have one sutta to dwell on quite a lot to finish this chapter off. So now is the summary of the sutta. Bhante, one who has not established mindfulness of the body might strike a fellow monk here and then set out on tour without apologizing. Then that accusing monk rose from his seat, arranged his upper robe over one shoulder, prostrated himself with his head at the Blessed One's feet, and said to the Blessed One, Bhante, I've committed a transgression in that I so foolishly, stupidly, and unskillfully slandered the Venerable Sariputta on baseless grounds. Bhante, may the Blessed One accept my transgression, seen as a transgression for the sake of future restraint. Surely, monk, you've committed a transgression in that you so foolishly, stupidly, and unskillfully slandered the Venerable Sariputta on baseless grounds. But since you see your transgression as a transgression and make amends for it in accordance with the Dhamma, we accept it. For it is growth in the noble one's discipline that one sees one's transgression as a transgression, makes amends for it in accordance with the Dhamma, and undertakes future restraint. Then the Blessed One then addressed the Venerable Sariputta. Sariputta, pardon this hollow man before his head splits into 7 pieces right there. I will pardon him, Bhante, if he asks me to pardon him. Da, da, da. So shall not only might he be oozing, his head might even split into 7 pieces, which is pretty intense, isn't it? But so beautiful to see the way that we can then apologize and you know, make up for these transgressions, and how quickly the Buddha forgives. Yeah. And then the Venerable Sariputta said, he will pardon him if he asks me to pardon him. Now, I don't think that means he hasn't forgiven him, but I think he's just again pointing to the proper course here. Yeah, the person needs to see their own offense, their own transgression, and acknowledge it there. So I think Linda had her hand up, and we're almost done, but I'd love to hear from you. You've not spoken in this group before. So
Linda, may I ask you to unmute?
Thank you.
we'll still finish on time.
Yeah, I'll just real quickly say I like one of the things that strikes me like overall is it just really lands how the way he says like I didn't do this is basically to say it's not possible. It's not in the nature of how things work. And just as a kind of small little aside to that, but one of the ones that particularly hit me, one of the 9 or however many in total, was the one about the bull. And the reason that one sort of like struck me a little extra was because it was about the taking out of the horns. And in a way, it's like that just felt illustrative of like what is a cause of aggression is taken out. And yeah, I just like the overall about the whole thing was it's just not possible was the answer with all of those illustrations. So kind of on the whole, it just lands with me in that way and feels very, I don't know, just very, just very joyous in that's how a person that has let go of self or understands non-self would respond. So
Beautiful, yeah, thank you. I love that description, the way you worded that it's just not possible. It's like it's not possible according to the law of nature that if somebody's seen so deeply into non-self, there can be any anger left. You know, it's not possible, and that it is only possible that their mind can be so vast, exalted, and measureless without enmity and ill will. You know, that's the natural outcome, right, of seeing the Dhamma at that depth, that there is an end of all of this. There really is a chance to uproot these defilements once and for all. Yeah. And how a person never then conceives in terms of a self. It's really beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And also with the bull, looking at the cause, rooted out, completely rooted out. In some suttas, it says made like a palm stump. It just means the tree can't grow again. Yeah. And there's a nice place where the Bhikkhu Bodhi, the Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, says that, you know, the uprooting is complete. I forget it now, actually, but he's basically saying it's complete, it's all around, it's yeah, there's no roots left, you know, it's just all that tendency towards ill will has just been completely obliterated. Very good. Okay, did you have your hand up again, Linda, or had it just not been taken down? Is it all right? Yeah, you're good. That's fine. I just wanted to make sure I didn't ignore anything. So I think normally we invite one of the co-hosts to speak now. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Hi, Kelly.
yeah, it's always really nice to and really inspiring to see so many people coming together to hear and discuss the Buddhist teaching. So thank you, Venerable Candā, for offering us this opportunity. So I want to say just a few words about Dana. As always, the Sutta discussion is offered on a donation basis. And if anyone would like to offer Dana, that would, as always, be very much appreciated. So anything you are able to give will continue to provide for Venerable Canda's material needs, support her to continue the teaching of the Dhamma, and support the setting up of the development of the first Bhikkhuni monastery in the UK. And I have put the link to the website where you can find out how to donate in the chat box. Thank you very much.
Thank you again to everybody for such a rich discussion. It's wonderful because, you know, I read these suttas and know them a little bit, but I can never get the same depth on my own, you know, because there's so many different ways to view these things. It applies to so many situations in life. So really, really beautiful to be here with you. And we still have one more weekend next week. So the metta on the Saturday. Actually, next week will be mudita. Yesterday we did compassion. I thought because I'm doing 3 from Perth, so metta, karuna, and next week mudita. And the last sutta class from the anger section. It's amazing. We've been doing this one for months and must have at least 15 classes just on this. So we've really thoroughly gone through that, and we'll finish that off next week. So I hope to see you then. And it's lovely to see some of you here who I haven't seen for a while, Ashira and Anna also in Sri Lanka, unless you've come back home already. No, yeah, you're back home, are you? Yeah, I can see, isn't it? I think you're back in Essex. So really nice to see you all, and our friends from America as well. Thank you to Hawk and also to Linda and wherever else you're calling in from. Very, very lovely to see you all. So we'll stop the recording now. Say goodbye.